Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Jesus Podcast, a podcast for everyday Christians seeking to follow Jesus every day. I am your host, Brian Boswell. Thank you for joining us today. Today, you are tuning in to a special series on parenting. Now, this is the 5th episode in this series, and while each episode is a standalone show, we are going chapter by chapter through the book Shepherding a Child's Heart by Tedd Tripp, and it may be helpful for you to go back and listen to the previous episodes before listening to this one. Now, today I am joined by my wife, Autumn, on the show.
Hello, everybody.
Autumn and I have been married for 11 years, and we have 4 small children between the ages of 2 and 7 years old. Autumn stays at home with our children, and we are a homeschooling family, so she is our children's primary teacher as well. So today we're going to talk about chapter 5, which is entitled Examining Our Goals. In this chapter, Tripp discusses the idea of examining our goals and deciding whether or not they are biblical. Now, obviously, all of us want to raise our children in a biblical manner. We all desire for our children to grow up, to be Christian, to get saved, and to live godly lives. Sometimes our goals and our methods don't line up. So the things that we put forth as our goal, we want to see our children grow to be healthy, mature, responsible Christian people who are, biblically literate, ones who love their neighbors and love God. But sometimes the things that we do, or as Tripp calls them in this passage, our unbiblical goals, they get in the way of that biblical goal or that biblical idea. So the end result, we're wanting our children to grow up to be good Christians, but some of the things that we do with our kids take away from that end goal. So he calls these unbiblical goals, and he mentions 7 of them in this chapter. And there's actually there's probably a lot more than just these 7, but these 7 are a good kind of launching point as far as discussion goes. So we're going to talk about the 7 different unbiblical goals that he mentions in this chapter. The very first one is called developing special skills, and in the book he names out gymnastics, dance, baseball, soccer, football, anything that you would consider an extracurricular activity is mentioned in this passage. And the whole idea is that these things in and of themselves are not bad. They're not evil. But what are we teaching our children through these things? So some of the special skills, we've got a daughter, she's in dance class. What are we teaching our daughter by her being in dance class? Is that something that's bringing her closer to God, or is that something that's pulling her away from God? Or do we believe that there are things that are just simply neutral in life? What do you think about that?
No, I thought about that too when I was reading about that. She's the only one that is in really an extracurricular activity, other than we do have Elijah. We do like a weekly soccer thing for him. With somebody at church. But with her, I feel that having her to go to ballet has helped her strengthen skills of kind of coming out of being shy. So she's been in a place, so obviously as we homeschool, she's always with me, or she even with me at school. When we go to our classical conversations, I was her tutor, so she was with me there. So then it at least gives her an opportunity to be have instruction by somebody else, and that gives her another outlet or somebody else that's in that authority, and she has actually come out, I think, of her shyness from that.
So one of the questions I've got is, and this is what you kind of didn't answer here. So is this
biblical?
Well, is it good, meaning godly, I guess? Is it bad, meaning evil? Or is it neutral? And I'm going to suggest that there is no neutrality.
No, I agree.
So there's nothing that's neutral in this world. One
Okay.
way or the other, it's either pushing you toward God or it's pulling you away from God.
And I don't think that it really pulls her towards God in what she's doing. There's definitely times when she has used her dance skills at home and will listen to a worship song and she dances, and even at church she will dance during the worship songs. I don't know if that would be considered a way to use it or not, but I do feel comfortable with that being addressed that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I really don't know how to feel about this. So when you talk about unbiblical goals, developing special skills, he puts it as kind of a way that you've put this skill or this set of skills or the number of skills up on this pedestal. So you're constantly trying to get your kids to either learn more skills, to do more, to be more involved.
Yeah.
But to what end? And I guess that's the question. To what end is she learning about Christ through dance? So obviously if we use dance in a way that she brings it into her worship of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a biblical idea. But I don't know that just someone going to dance, and I don't know that even her getting another instructor is necessarily helpful. It's not. The question is what is she learning?
Right.
So, these kids are constantly learning. They're constantly, picking up on things. What is she learning through all of this? So that's the question that we've got to answer there.
She's learning a skill in that, and it's not necessarily directing her towards God, though.
Right, but I mean, not that skills are bad. So that's what he's saying.
Right.
Not that there's not necessarily bad. I mean, obviously you can use skills for the rest of your life. If you learn how to write, you could be a writer and you could write good things or you can write bad things.
True.
So it's no different than anything else. But the question is what are we teaching her through all of this? You know what I mean?
Like,
So-
what emphasis are we placing on it? Like, how important is it over other things?
Yeah, that's another good question. The next unbiblical goal is psychological adjustment. And in this section, he talks about how some parents are looking for the latest and greatest in pop psychology in order to fix their children. So if mom and dad had low self-esteem, they may try and find ways to boost little Johnny and little Jill's self-esteem. If they're scared of overindulging their children, they'll find ways to have children that are not spoiled. So for every psychological issue, there is basically a book of the month out there that's going to help you fix your child, whatever your child's issue may be, or whatever your issue was, trying to prevent your children having the same issues that you had. What do you think about this?
I mean, I think everybody's trying to find a way to parent the best they can. And so when you go to those sources, they're not necessarily biblical sources. So I think that is the whole point that he is trying to make, that it's not based on biblical scripture.
Yeah, they're trying to find secular psychologists and those types of things that are going to fill a void, or some people just keep their lives separate. So they go to church on Sunday and that's their spiritual life. The rest of the week has nothing to do with their spiritual life.
Right, so they reach for those things. And then just kind of the whole premise of the book of it doesn't get to the heart issue, it gets to fix the, like, almost the things that are on the surface issues. Like why, your child is being disobedient in certain areas, then it helps you to fix that certain area versus why they're doing it, like where their heart is.
Yep. The number 3 unbiblical goal is saved children. So the idea here is that as Christian parents, we obviously want our children to be saved. We want to see them saved. We want them to be in relationship with Christ. But if the goal is just simply to, get them to punch their ticket to heaven, We're missing out on a whole lot that the Bible says about our daily lives, about how we ought to live, how we ought to worship. We're really missing a relationship. So if the goal is just to get them to repeat a sinner's prayer, then obviously that's an unbiblical goal. Repetition of prayers isn't what's going to save your children. It's Jesus who's going to actually do the saving. It's not just, hey, 5-year-old son, repeat after me. That way you can go to heaven, and then we can move on to different things from there. Tripp states in the book, there are many passages that teach the need to shepherd, to train, to instruct, and to discipline your children. None of these passages has getting a child to pray the sinner's prayer as its focus. And I agree with that. So I think that the Bible's clear. We have to be good parents. And part of being good parents is not necessarily just pushing the issue of salvation constantly, but it's a whole life goal. It's shepherding your child's heart. It's looking after your child in everything that he does, not just the spiritual side of it, not just the repetition of a prayer to get his ticket punched and go to heaven. That's not the point. And that's not the point of any of our lives. If all you have of spirituality is, hey man, I said a prayer, 15 years ago, then that's not really spirituality. That was a magic incantation that you think's going to save you. And that's not what saves you. Only Jesus saves you.
Right. And just like it says here, like you said in the book, the goal is not to get your children saved to make things easier. I mean, just because you're saved doesn't mean life is easier. And I don't think that is a good way to look at that either.
Yeah, there's obviously many passages in the New Testament, like Jesus, who said that there's going to be people who are going to come to him and say, Lord, Lord, did I not cast out demons in your name? Did I not heal the sick? Mm-hmm. And he's going to say, depart from me, for I never knew you. And that should be sobering to all of us, is that the goal in life is not simply to get someone to recite a prayer, a one-time event. The goal in life is for people to become relationally connected to Christ. And it's a process, and it's a lifelong journey. It's not just something that you do once and then you move on to something else. It's a lifelong journey. Number 4 is family worship. Now, this idea is that there are some people who they put devotionals or prayer time or whatever it is as the highest goal in the family, is that every day, no matter what, we're going to get up and we're going to do our devotions. We're going to slog through it if we have to. Everybody's going to be present. Everybody's going to be participating, and we're going to do this. And it's kind of this idea that you're forcing a religion on your children, but you're not really giving them the relationship. So again, being a part of Christ, being a Christian, means that you have a relationship with Jesus. It's not simply you've done this, these little check marks. I'm checking off, well, I've done my devotional today. I spent 10 minutes in prayer. Whatever it is you think that you have to do, that's not the point of Christianity. The check marks are not the point. The point is being in relationship with God, period.
Those are all good things, but he's saying to not focus on those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Number 5, well-behaved children. So this idea is just, we need to make sure that our kids are the best behaved. We're going to teach them manners. We're going to teach them respect. We're going to teach them. And again, none of these things are bad things, but the point is, if that's your end goal, if that's what the big thing, the big idea that you push in your family is for everyone to be well-behaved, that's not teaching them what the Bible says that you ought to teach them. So we're supposed to train them, we're supposed to instruct them, we're supposed to discipline them. But well-behaved, that's a byproduct of us doing what we are supposed to be doing with Christ. That's not the end goal. So again, it's unbiblical if we make that the focus.
Right. Right, because this is probably the one that hit me the hardest, because I have felt like it was a big goal for me. And so instead of, it was eye-opening for me to say, okay, that's a byproduct of biblical child rearing versus just that being my goal of making sure my kids are well behaved. And because everybody always said, oh, you have well behaved kids, so I just assumed that should be the right thing to do. But and then in the end, it's supposed to be a benefit to it.
Yeah. So you have a quote in here: when being well-mannered is severed from biblical roots in servanthood, manners become a classy tool of manipulation.
Yep. So I also put on here too that I feel like that it means that without God as the center and meaning, our kids can use their politeness to their advantage so they can get what they want that way.
And it could be just a means of manipulation on your part.
That's true.
So if the entire point is that you don't want to be embarrassed when you go to the store, or you don't want, anybody to think ill of you, then you're manipulating your children to make you look good.
True.
Number 6, good education. So the entire idea of number 6 is this. The entire idea of good education is that some people elevate education as the main priority in your child's life. Everything they do, everything that they push for and strive for is to get the child into the best schools, into the best colleges, and so that they get the best education possible. And while good education is awesome, it's something that we should all strive for, that's an unbiblical goal. The Bible never says that we should worry about whether our children get into the best colleges.
Right.
The Bible teaches us is that we should educate our children. We should teach them, as Deuteronomy 6 says, we're going to teach them while they're going in and while they're coming out all day long, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We are teaching our children constantly.
Right.
So,
no matter what we think we are or not.
Exactly. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that while education is a method of doing what is right before God, obviously we are told to instruct our children in the way they should go. And while that's a method, that's not the end goal. The end goal is not that they'll just be educated. The end goal is not that they'll have a Liberty University diploma. The end goal is that they would have a relationship with Christ, that they would follow after him all the days of their lives. Those are the end goals, is that you connect your children to Christ. The last one is control. So this unbiblical idea is for people who have no goals at all. They don't know what they're doing. They're just kind of going through life. And the only thing that they really want to do is they want to control their children. They want control and authority over their child to make them behave, be nice, do what is right, whatever you want to say, but they just want control over their child. It's kind of this idea of a dictatorship. I'm just going to do whatever I think. There's no real end goal. There's no real method to the madness. It's just simply whatever I'm doing, it's with the idea that I just want to control that child. Obviously, we've all known people like this, and some of us may have grown up with parents like this. God very clearly tells us that we need to have a goal in mind with our children. It should be to shepherd their heart, to instruct them, to train them, to do all those things. Control was not one of them. Mm-hmm. Never does the Bible say we need to just control our children. That's not the goal. Obviously, we want them to respect authority. We want them to understand authority, and part of that is teaching them that method, but the idea of just simply control for control's sake is not anywhere near biblical. But we see a lot of people who, like Tripp says, they don't have a goal in mind. They just simply know that they need to be in control, so that's what they do.
So at this point of the chapter, I was thinking, okay, what do I do with this? So what direction should be my focus? I know we are supposed to direct our kids toward God, but what does this look like? So towards the end of the chapter, Tripp gives a warning against cultural influence. We must reject things in the culture that are abhorrent to Jehovah our God. Here are some good questions to think about that Tripp asks in this section. The first one is, what goal is broad enough and flexible enough to be suitable to all stages of development? Number 2, What general biblical objectives will guide and focus your view of life and therefore your training of your children? And number 3, what is a worthy biblical goal? If you don't already know about the Shorter Catechism, Tripp references this as being the answer to these questions. And the question is, what is the chief end of man? And the answer is, man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. Now, we are not perfect parents by any stretch of the imagination, but I was excited to read this section because we have implemented this in our homeschool. I cannot say I follow this out when it comes to everything we do, but our children do know the answer to this question, among several of the others in the Shorter Catechism, and I highly recommend going through this book with your children at any age. As quoted from the book, if you teach them to use their abilities, aptitudes, talents, and intelligence to make their lives better without reference to God, you turn them away from God. If your objectives are anything other than man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever, you teach your children to function in the culture on its terms.
So why do you think this is so important? Like, why, you said you got excited about reading this section. I know we do we go over the catechism is what you're saying with our kids. Why does this mean so much, do you think?
I think because in everything we do, it should be we should point our kids to God. And even with discipline, we tell them that they should obey us because God put us in charge of them. And all that, even when we homeschool with, the little things that we do, all the subjects should all be directed towards God. And so I got excited reading this again and going back to how we homeschool. It gets me excited too because our classical conversations is to know God and to make Him known. It just gets me excited that we are heading in that direction and going in that direction that we need to be. So then lastly, I wanted to go over the remaining section of the chapter. It's titled Mixed Signals. There are so many things that are convicting for me in this last half of this chapter, and especially in this section. Mixed signals in this context is knowing about biblical goals, but teaching my kids different objectives to pursue and ways of solving life's problems that are unbiblical. I am ultimately teaching my kids to think unbiblically, and I think I am guilty of this. One example that stands out to me is giving my kids material things and getting excited with them when they are excited about receiving them. Some other examples from the book are filling my children's lives with distractions, satisfying their lust for excitement, and teaching them to find soul's delight in going places and doing things. This is so convicting for me.
Why is that?
Just because I feel like I'm guilty of doing that. And that I'm not guiding my kids biblically then. So
you think it's wrong to get excited when you give your kids something?
I think it's wrong, I guess, to place as big of an emphasis on it as I have. Like, I feel like that comes above, like, with Christmas, like the big part of Christmas is getting the gifts and getting excited about the gifts. It's not, when we do talk about it, and we do talk about, they know that it's Jesus' birth, and we talk about that story, but that's not the big thing. Right.
Do you expect them to get as excited about hearing the Christmas story as they are about getting the gifts?
No, I guess not, but at the same time, I feel like the emphasis we place on that is not biblical. Instead of giving them as many gifts as we do, we talk to them about using some of what we'd give to them and give it to others, like to actually show, like, I have a giving spirit.
Yeah. To finish up, he lists some questions for more discussion. Number 1, you are pushed and pulled by things that are listed under unbiblical goals. Which of these unbiblical goals influences your parenting the most adversely?
I think I touched on that earlier with the well-behaved children, but I probably could also kind of tie it in with the good education as well, because I think I want to have well-behaved kids and I want them to have a good education as a homeschool mom. Of course, we always gear our kids towards getting the best education that they can, and it is kind of a big emphasis for us right now is telling them they have to do school every day. So I know they have to be educated and all that. I don't know if I necessarily put too much emphasis on that based on whether I feel like they need to go to college or not. But definitely the well-behaved children. I always feel like if my kids don't look well-behaved, it looks bad on me.
Well, obviously, the education part's important just because of what we're doing. So the reason we homeschool is because we believe education is important.
Right.
And we believe that the best method of education is homeschooling your children.
Right.
If possible. In the same go-round, again, it goes back to the fact that methods, so the method in which you use, the ways that you do things shouldn't be your goal. So the idea is that education is a method in which you bring or you tutor your child toward Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, if it's your main goal is just to have an educated child, then you're going to do things that are probably unbiblical along the way as well.
That's true.
So, number 2, like Old Testament Israel, you are affected by the culture around you. How has the culture impacted your view of children and your goals for your children?
I think our culture today with technology and all that, I feel like that has definitely impacted my kids. They are definitely going to grow up different than we did, and our goals kind of tend to be different because of that. We can use the technology to our advantage, and I think that just depends on how we use that. So sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad.
How do you define success? How would your child complete this sentence? What mom and dad want for me is... Fill in the blank.
Okay, so I would define success as being able to, as for my child, for being able to function in society and also be biblically literate. For me, if my kids can have those things, then I feel like I have given them success. But then, what was the sentence?
How would your child complete this sentence? What mom and dad want for me is...
What I would like for them to say at this point is to kind of go back to the Bible and say to know God and to make him known, because we say that all the time. And I don't think they would necessarily say that. I would think it would be more, mom and dad want me to behave, want me to be obedient or obey them because God tells them to bring me up that way, want me to do good at school. I mean, more like that, be good or...
Well, for me, success is that they would have a relationship with Christ, that they would know Christ. The idea of what would they say when asked, mom and dad want for me? What does mom and dad want for me? I would hope it would be along those same lines, that it would be that mom and dad want me to, to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Final question. Are you in tune with the idea of living for the glory of God? Does that thought pulsate for you, or is it just a bland religious idea?
It's definitely not a bland religious idea. I mean, I definitely relate to that. I mean, I think about it all the time or a lot of the time. So like I was saying, yeah, I don't think it's a bland religious idea. I mean, I think it's definitely something that I think about on a day-to-day basis. And that in turn helps me guide the kids in what they should do. I mean, it's not perfect every day, but I definitely feel like I'm trying to be in tune to that. How
does it guide you?
A lot of the time it's how I react to the things that the kids may do, or how they obey me or don't obey me or whatever, because I tend to get impatient and angry. If I focus on how God would want me to treat them, then that helps me with them.
Do they know that's what you're doing?
Probably not. They're pretty unconditional with their love right now. They love me no matter what I do, and I don't deserve that, so I guess I could do a better job at being that example for them.
So thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this special episode. If you have any thoughts or comments, shoot us an email at feedback@everydayjesus.net. Like and share our page on Facebook. Leave us a review on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Hit us up on Twitter. Consider becoming a club member. It costs just $5 a month, and it helps us cover the hosting cost and the website charges. Check out our website, everydayjesus.net, for free resources and content, and we hope you have a very blessed week.